Welcome back. Something significant happened yesterday, March 18, 2026, and most people have not fully grasped what it means. America's top trade official, the man directly in charge of rewriting the most important trade deal on the planet, went on live television and told the entire world that Canada is losing. Not just struggling, not just behind, losing to Mexico. His name is Jamieson Greer. He is the United States Trade Representative. He is the person with the pen, and the clock right now is winding toward July 1, 2026. That is the hard deadline. That is the date every country in North America must declare whether the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, CUSMA known as CUSMA, in the United States lives, dies, or enters a decade of painful limbo less than 15 weeks away. And here is what is at stake in plain numbers. Every single day, $3.6 billion in goods and services crosses the Canada-U.S. border. Every single day. That is not a year's worth of trade. That is what moves in 24 hours. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, this relationship totals $1.3 trillion per year, the largest bilateral trade relationship in the world. Canada just shed 84,000 jobs in February alone. That is official data from Statistics Canada, confirmed by the BBC and the Globe and Mail. The unemployment rate jumped to 6.7%, the sharpest single-month drop since the pandemic. Real people, real job losses, happening right now. In plain English, here is exactly what Jamieson Greer demanded. Greer went on Fox Business on March 18, 2026, and he did not mince words. He said this, and I want you to hear it precisely. We're having talks separately with Canada, but we've moved along with Mexico. Canada is behind on this. That was Jamieson Greer, March 18, 2026, Fox Business, reported by Bloomberg. And the Canadian press, let us strip away the diplomatic packaging. Here is what that statement actually means. First, the United States has already launched formal negotiations with Mexico. Greer personally met with Mexico's Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard that same afternoon to advance those talks. The agenda included rules of origin, the legal rules that determine what counts as North American-made and what does not. Formal, official, moving. Second, Canada does not have formal negotiations running. Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's trade minister, met with Greer in Washington on March 6. That is 12 days before Greer publicly said Canada is behind. And after that meeting, no announcement, no formal negotiations, nothing. Third, Greer has a specific list of grievances against Canada. He made them public. He said, and again, this is a direct quote from Fox Business, reported by Vancouver City News, they refuse to sell U.S. wine and spirits on their shelves. There are a variety of issues they have not addressed and aren't addressing, and this makes it a big challenge and an obstacle for starting real negotiations with them. He is not talking about weapons or espionage. He is talking about wine on a shelf. But that is the stated reason the most powerful trade official in the world is using to justify why Canada is being left behind. Now look at the real economic weight. According to Reuters, Trump already raised tariffs on Canada to 35% in July 2025, up from the original 25% auto manufacturing has. Absorbed 29% of all U.S. duties collected on Canadian imports in 2025, according to RBC Economics. Aluminum and related products took another 23%, steel, lumber, cabinets, all being taxed. And if that is not enough, Reuters reported in January 2026 that Trump threatened a 100% tariff on Canada if Canada makes a trade deal with China. 100%, the documented goal is leverage. Greer has made this explicit. He told CBC News that any future deal with Canada, any deal at all, will include permanent tariffs. Now here is where the story gets deeply interesting. Canada did not beg. Canada did not panic. Canada did not scramble to Washington with concessions. Prime Minister Mark Carney did something entirely different. On January 22, 2026, speaking directly to Canadians before a global audience at Davos that gave him a sustained, rare standing ovation, reported by Reuters, Carney said these words: "Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian." That was Prime Minister Mark Carney, January 22, 2026. Reported by Reuters, BBC, and multiple Tier 1 outlets. And then, on March 5, 2026, just 13 days before Greer publicly humiliated Canada, Carney named the situation plainly. He said that CUSMA, the trade agreement itself, had effectively been broken in the short term by U.S. actions. He did not yell. He did not look panicked. He spoke with the calm, precise language of a former central banker who has watched economic crises from the inside. Here is why this reaction was a masterstroke. Carney did not negotiate from fear. He changed the equation entirely. As Bloomberg reported on March 14, 2026, Carney has been globe-trotting, traveling to Asia, the Indo-Pacific, rallying allies. Canada signed a bilateral trade deal with Indonesia. Canada's first-ever agreement with an ASEAN nation announced in September 2025. Canada also launched a joint Canada-Mexico Action Plan 2025 to 2028 to deepen economic integration between the two countries. LeBlanc led a major trade mission to Mexico just last month. A Mexican trade delegation is scheduled to travel to Canada in May. Canada is not sitting still. Canada is quietly building the exit ramps, and that shifts the entire power dynamic. Let us pull back the curtain on what is really happening in the negotiating rooms and the trading floors. According to Bloomberg's reporting from March 18, 2026, the Trump administration launched new investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 against a long list of countries, including Canada, citing forced labor in supply chains. This is significant. The U.S. Supreme Court had recently reined in the president's tariff powers in a landmark ruling, and these Section 301 investigations are now being used as a legal mechanism to restore and expand tariffs. In other words, the courts pushed back. The White House found a new legal door. According to Bloomberg reporting published on March 18, 2026, Canada had in the background been working toward a thaw after Trump froze negotiations with Ottawa entirely last year. Why did Trump freeze talks? Because an Ontario-sponsored advertisement quoted former President Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs. That is confirmed. That is the level of sensitivity at play here. The financial implications are severe. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, a 25% tariff regime would shrink Canada's GDP by 2.6%. The equivalent loss for an average Canadian household would be $1,900 per year. For the average American family, the same dynamic would cost $1,300 annually, because this is not a one-way street. Now consider this. Trump has floated the idea of scrapping CUSMA entirely in favor of two separate bilateral deals, one with Canada, one with Mexico. Greer confirmed this publicly. The Financial Times reported that the U.S. and Mexico have already formally launched CUSMA review negotiations. Canada has not. The gap between the two is not narrow. It is widening. I want you to understand just how deeply knotted this economy is, not with abstract language, with one real product. A company called Linamar Corporation, based in Guelph, Ontario. They make automatic transmission modules, and before one of their transmission modules reaches your car, that product crosses the US, Canadian, and Mexican borders 7 times. Here is the verified journey, sourced directly from Linamar and reported by the Wall Street Journal and the London Free Press. Step 1. Linamar's scrap metal from their Guelph factory travels to a steel smelter in Pennsylvania. Step 2. That steel becomes a hub component manufactured in Ohio. Step 3. The hub ships back to Guelph, Ontario, assembled into clutch plates. Step 4. Linamar imports aluminum housings from its own foundry in Coahuila, Mexico, combined with parts from Illinois, assembled into a module in Guelph. Step 5. The assembled module ships to a vehicle transmission plant in the American Midwest. Step 6. Finished transmissions travel back to an Ontario vehicle assembly plant. Step 7. Vehicles roll off the line. Some stay in Canada, most return to U.S. dealer lots. 7 border crossings, 1 transmission module. According to Kevin Hallahan, vice president of Linamar, quoted by the London Free Press, if plants stop and automakers need to build new supply chains outside of North America, it would take about 2 years for an automaker to source new suppliers to avoid tariffs. 2 years. And here is the brutal irony. The tariff is charged every time that part crosses the border. The 25 or 35% is not a one-time fee. It is compounded, multiplied across 7 crossings. According to RBC Economics data from 2025, auto manufacturing alone accounts for 29% of all U.S. duties currently being collected on Canadian imports. The number is not hypothetical. The tariff machine is already running. Flavio Volpe, chief executive of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, quoted by the London Free Press, put it plainly: tariffs will shut the industry down. The best analogy I can think of is the Cold War and the nuclear deterrence that assured mutual destruction. This is not spin. This is from the man who runs the trade association for the industry itself. There are really only 3 ways this plays out, and every single one matters to your daily life. The first possible outcome is the back down. Talks quietly accelerate. Canada makes concessions on provincial alcohol barriers and a handful of other irritants Greer has named publicly. The United States formally launches CUSMA review negotiations with Canada in the coming weeks. By July 1, 2026, all 3 countries signal renewal. The deal extends for another 16 years. Prices stabilize, the immediate crisis passes. We have seen this before. In 2018 and 2019, NAFTA, the original agreement, looked finished. Both Canada and Mexico faced enormous pressure. The result was CUSMA, a renegotiated deal, signed in 2020 during Trump's first term. Everyone declared victory. The economy moved on. This is the boring outcome. It is also the most economically rational one. The second possible outcome is the messy path. The clock runs out. July arrives. No deal. Canada does not renew, or the U.S. signals withdrawal. Tariffs escalate further. The Section 301 investigations already launched against Canada in March 2026 produce a new layer of duties. Supply chains begin to freeze. Automakers pause production. Layoffs accelerate beyond the 84,000 already lost in February. We have seen this too. The U.S.-China trade war of 2018 to 2019 dragged on for 18 months of genuine disruption. Farmers lost markets. Factories slowed. The costs were real and documented, reported by Bloomberg and Reuters. At the time, consumers paid more. Jobs moved. The auto industry is far more integrated than soybeans. The damage potential is substantially higher. The third possible outcome is the paradigm shift. Canada slowly, strategically walks away from a U.S.-centric economic model and never fully returns. This is not dramatic. It does not happen overnight. But the direction hardens. Canada deepens the Mexico partnership. The Indonesia trade deal becomes a template. The Indo-Pacific pivot Carney is personally leading becomes a structural shift in where Canada sells its energy, its lumber, its grain, its technology. We have seen this happen before too. Post-Brexit, United Kingdom tried to do exactly this, rebuild its trade identity outside of a dominant bloc. It was painful. The results have been mixed, but the direction became irreversible. Canada has something the UK did not. Canada has resources, oil, natural gas, critical minerals. The world needs them, and the world has been watching this trade war very closely. Right now, nobody knows which path we are on, but you need to be ready. Let me bring this entirely down to your daily life, because that is where this actually lives. Statistics Canada confirmed in a report released March 13, 2026, that Canada's economy shed 84,000 jobs in February 2026. The BBC called it the sharpest drop in Canada's employment totals since the COVID-19 pandemic. The unemployment rate is now 6.7%. Of those job losses, manufacturing was disproportionately hit. 30,000 manufacturing jobs gone in a single month. Wholesale and retail followed with nearly 27,000. According to RBC Economics, the 5 most targeted Canadian industries are auto manufacturing, aluminum, iron and steel, machinery, and lumber. Together, they represent the backbone of communities across Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, 2.3 million Canadian jobs are directly tied to exports to the United States. 2.3 million and 1.4 million American jobs are tied to Canadian exports in return. This is not a foreign policy debate. This is your neighbor who works at an auto plant. This is the farmer who exports grain south. This is the small steel fabricator whose margins are already paper thin. A 25% tariff regime, according to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, would cost the average Canadian household $1,900 every year. That is not a rebate you get back. That is rent money. That is groceries. That is your kids' school supplies. And the domino effect is already moving. Canadian auto parts manufacturers are reporting production slowdowns. Steel producers are reporting a 5% production decline. Downstream aluminum manufacturing dropped 14% in 2025, per RBC Economics. The Ontario government has estimated that a full tariff war could put 500,000 jobs at risk across the province. That is a verified government figure, cited by the London Free Press and Linamar executives directly. 500,000 jobs. That is not a worst-case scenario drawn from thin air. That is the Ontario government's documented projection. Let me be direct with you now. Here is what both sides are actually doing and what you should do. The Trump administration's documented strategy is leverage. Greer said it plainly to CBC News. Any future deal with Canada, including a renewed CUSMA, will include permanent tariffs. The legal architecture is being rebuilt. Section 301 investigations provide a new runway after the Supreme Court ruling. The public pressure. Telling the world Canada is behind is designed to force concessions. Canada's documented strategy is patience, diversification, and credibility. Carney has refused to negotiate from fear. He has said so directly. He is building alternative relationships Asia, Mexico, Europe not as a bluff but as genuine infrastructure. The Canada-Mexico Action Plan 2025 to 2028 is a formal document, not a press release. Now, here is what you should do if you are listening to this. If you are a business owner, especially in manufacturing, supply chain, agriculture, or any sector that crosses the border, call your suppliers this week. Audit your cost structure. Know exactly what a 35% tariff does to your margins, not hypothetically actually model it. The window for preparation is still open. It will not stay open indefinitely. If you are a worker in an affected sector, auto, steel, aluminum, lumber, watch the July 1st date carefully. Not with panic, with preparation. Talk to your union. Know your rights. Know what support programs exist. If you are a consumer, understand that some price increases are already baked in. They will not reverse overnight regardless of what deal is reached. Plan your household budget with that reality in mind. Financial experts from institutions including RBC Economics and Bloomberg have consistently made this point: the greatest damage from trade wars is not the tariff itself, it is the uncertainty. It freezes investment, it stops hiring, it delays decisions. The antidote to uncertainty is preparation. Do not panic, plan. The world is watching, every word matters. The board is set. On March 18, 2026, the United States Trade Representative publicly declared Canada is behind Mexico in trade negotiations. That is confirmed. That is a fact. The CUSMA review clock runs to July 1, 2026. Every country must make a choice. That is confirmed. That is a fact. Canada lost 84,000 jobs. In February 2026. That is confirmed. Statistics Canada data. Mexico has formal negotiations underway with the United States. Canada does not. That is confirmed. A $1.3 trillion annual trade relationship is hanging on decisions being made in rooms most of us will never see. That is confirmed. The clock is winding down. Canada's Prime Minister has said CUSMA is broken. America's top trade official has said Canada is behind. And quietly, very quietly, both Canada and Mexico are building something new together that has nothing to do with Washington. Nobody knows which path we are on, but you are no longer walking in the dark. I am going to skip the political spin. I am going to track the real numbers. I am going to bring you the exact facts tomorrow. I am here to make sure you have the facts. Have a good night. Stay calm and check in with us tomorrow.